So we were on page number 56. So Lord Buddha, who is someone who independently taught the teachings of Tibetan arising and who is the unsurpassable and undefeatable teacher of the world. So historically it has been about 2,600 years since he came to India. So though it is a long period since Lord Buddha came to this world, but the teaching of the Buddha is still very vividly practiced and practiced in this world, and also it's very relevant and helpful to people in one's daily life. Generally, even we can find, even in the scientific society, that religion is merely considered something to be followed by those who have only faith, and it's not something that can be scrutinized by reasoning or subject to investigation. But when they heard the explanations and the teachings coming from Lord Buddha, then they sometimes seems a bit surprised. And some of the scholars even say that the teaching of the Buddha is, in English, what we call is not religion, it is a science of mind. So whatever the case may be, in 21st century, so the name and the fame of the teachings of the Buddha is still growing and will ever grow. But we are not saying here that the whole world has to be the follower of Lord Buddha. Of course, there are different traditions and the religions. And I also never tell people that Buddhism is the best religion, and whether the religion is good or not, it depends upon the followers and the individuals, whether which teachings of the which master is more beneficial to that particular individual. So whatever the teaching is more beneficial, that becomes the best teaching for them. So it's same as the medicine. So there is not like a universal medicine that can be cure for every illness and for every patient. So depending upon a patient and his illness, of course, also taking into account his physical natures, physical strengths, and all these things when you take together, so the doctor can only prescribe good medicine for that patient. So only taking into account all these factors, a medicine becomes suitable or best for that particular patient. Similarly, so we are never going to claim that Buddhism is the best religion in the world and that everyone has to practice Buddhism. But for us, we have been the followers of Lord Buddha, and we are Buddhist from our many generations. And Buddhism is the religion of the fathers and the forefathers. So therefore, it is suitable for us to be Buddhist and to be a follower of Lord Buddha's teaching. But in Western countries, they have their own native religions, such as Jewish and also Islam and Christianity and so on. But for them, I used to say that it is important that they embrace and practice their own religions and remain within the teachings of their own masters. So it is not easy to change a religion. And I used to say that the teachings of the Buddha, accordingly, we have to be a 21st century Buddhist. So in the past, we have been coming as taking into account the teaching of the Buddha as usual as a traditions and without subjecting to much investigation. But later now, when we heard, so if you follow in the same pattern for a long time, merely based on the faith, then if you hear many other explanations, then your faith may shake at that time. And as I described yesterday about the followers of the Lord Buddha's teachings are usually of two, the intelligent and the lesser intelligent one. So as we usually also speaks about the four realizances, that the person is not important, but the teaching is important, that it is something taught by a great master. So therefore, since this is taught by that master, so we have to accept it. So this is not possible. So the person who preaches is not important, but the words that he speaks is important. Therefore, the first reliance is that to not rely upon the person, rather rely upon his teaching. And even for the teaching, do not rely upon the words, but rely upon the meaning. So if the word may not be very poetic or beautiful expression, but if the meaning is very helpful, so then we have to take the meaning and consider it more important. So without any solid meaning, so merely a poetic verse or the words may not be any helpful. And the meaning also, the reason why we practice the teaching is to defeat the afflicted emotions within us, to use the teaching as an antidote to decrease the afflicted emotions within us. So the teachings such as generosity and to be abide by the ethical discipline. So these teachings are actually common to all the religious traditions in the world. So the only distinction that we find is the sixth one, which is the wisdom, which is related to the emptiness, that the things do not have exist as is appear. So these kind of the explanations merely cannot be understood by having merely a faith. So you have to study for that. So if you do not know something today, and it is impossible to know something tomorrow immediately when you get up. So even if you look at the progress of a day, first the dawn, the early morning, the light, then gradually the light comes, then the sun arises. So there is a procedure, that the order that has to follow. Similarly, the illumination of the wisdom is similar. So first it has to progress from a small light, then which can illuminate a certain amount of your ignorance. So gradually it has to also progress further, and this can be possible if you take the help of the three wisdoms, which is listening to the teaching and reflection and meditation. So if one follows all these practices, then you become truly a 21st century Buddhist. Other than that, I have faith, I am doing my daily prayers, I am taking the Bodhisattva precepts. So, but when you are asked what is really the teaching, and if you cannot answer or cannot contemplate, then this is a kind of a repetition or redundant. And you usually recite, I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And you have to know what is the Buddha, what are the qualifications, definitions of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And within the Buddha that we usually go for refuge, what kind of the Buddha is that? Is that the Buddha that you are going to be enlightened, or is it another Buddha? So in this way you have to investigate. So if you generate a faith based on which is grounded to such understanding and wisdom, so if other people also brings misinterpretations to you, but your faith, which is grounded in the wisdom, will not be shaken. So therefore, the third reliance came that the meaning should be also rely upon the definitive meaning rather than the provisional meaning. So the fourth one, even in the definitive, do not rely upon the sensory consciousness, but rather on the mental consciousness. And so this we can interpret in this way, that when the sutra presents a teaching, and if the teaching presents an ultimate truth, so the presentation which is coming from the sutra, whether this can be sustained if we scrutinize or subject to critical investigations following different reasons. If that remains the same, then that is something called the definitive. So if the teaching that is coming from a particular sutra needs to be interpreted further when subjected to investigation, then we have to consider the meaning of that teaching as an interpretable or or provisional meaning. So this is the complete meaning of the fourth reliances. So do not depend upon the sensory consciousness, but rather the mental experiences. So I used to tell everyone that you have to be a follower of the Lord Buddha in this way, having understood. As Dhammakriti says that when you do not understand the nature of phenomena, so it is very difficult to give the teaching to others without first generating the understanding for us. So even for me, when I face you and I give the teaching, I myself need certain experiences. And as we discussed yesterday, I have practiced and meditated on the compassion and emptiness, wisdom of emptiness for 30 years. Of course, my realization is not very high, and still I'm not on the path. Sorry, I have a strength in my mind that if I work hard, I may be able to attain the first part of accumulation, and if my concentration level improves, I may be able to reach the second part, which is the preliminary part. Sorry. And as the Lama Tsongkhapa says that, so based on my own faith and with the wisdom that I wanted that the teachings of the Buddha will be flourish. So what I'm presenting you is something that I have experienced myself, that I have tasted myself. So we all have the same way to think, same potential to investigate. So once my own experience, for example, will be relevant and helpful to some other people. And if you consider me as also a manifestation of our Lokiteshvara, and Dalai Lama is different, Rinpoche, because he is the manifestation of our Lokiteshvara. So I'm requesting you not to say such things. When I was a child, I loved to play, and I also do not like to study much when I'm young. So we are all same. There is no difference between all of us. And usually we have a curtain, usually saying that in the perspective of the common students. So whether it is in the appearance of the students or whatever. In my case, I as a beginner have worked really very hard to practice, and now when I'm old, so I can speak from my experience that it has to be built upon. And the teaching is also not about something merely that you express or merely that you debate. So it should be something that is related to your mind. As Lama Tsongkhapa says that first study the extensive sutras, then in the middle period contemplate and do reflection upon the meanings, and ultimately practiced the teachings day in and night. And these are all dedicated for the flourishment of the teaching. So even when you start studying your debate from the elementary school, so when you heard about the no-self and those things, when you freshly start your debate class, so you should be able to take these instructions towards your own practice. And also the teachers, when you teach your students from the starting levels, of course they may not be able to practice and understand everything at that time, but you should lead them in a way that they will be ready. They can be ready for the practice when they grow up. So in this world, when there is a certain materialistic development in this world, and even from the scientific, we have to, the scientific innovations and developments also do not arise at one time. So the innovations and the developments and new scientific findings has happened through different experiments and investigations that takes months, days, years, and so on. So similarly, from our side, the practice and the realizations have to be followed in the same way. So it is the same. If you do not follow in such things, then of course it won't be any service to the teachings of the Buddha. Rather, it will be a shame to the teachings of the Buddha if we are not able to practice. As Trungpa Rinpoche says that, when I listen to the teachings, I meditate, I reflect upon it. When I reflect upon the teaching, I meditate. So these three wisdoms I am practicing without leaving one alone, one separate from the other. So to continue with the transmission, we are on verse number 73. A Buddha too should always behave in this way. So Tibetan term Tupa is usually for enlightened, but in English it is written Bodhisattva here. Verse number 74. With respect, I should gratefully accept unsought after words that are of benefit, and that wisely advise and admonish me. At all times, I should be the pupil of everyone. I should say well said to all those who speak well, and if I see someone doing good, I should praise him and be well pleased. His Holiness comments that if someone praises you, then you shouldn't feel too pleased. So if someone really praise your qualifications, then you have to rejoice that is really a kind of your own realizations. So they are the lamas and the masters. Of course, they first work very hard. Later, when they have many students, especially when they have many Westerner students, then they sometimes boast a little bit. Verse number 76, I should discreetly talk about the good qualities. So whatever we do, it has to be something to satisfy our own mind. Something that we can be and if you have doubt that one day, so whatever my actings, whatever I speak or do, so may come out wrongly, or so therefore, if you do or everything, so with a very kind and in an honest way, so without lying and to anyone, so you will be really very proud, you're very confident, so you do not have to have any fear about that. So this will be very helpful. Verse number 76, if my own good qualities are spoken about, I should just know and be aware that I have them. All deeds are the source of a joy. They would be rare even if it could be bought with money. Therefore, I should be happy in finding this joy. So there is a cheese from the offering done by the Mongolian, and I have eaten it, so I think it's better to swallow it first. So this is a benefit for the master. So it's offered to me, so you don't have it. Continuously reading from verse number 77, all deeds are the source of a joy that will be rare even if it could be bought with money. Therefore, I should be happy in finding this joy in the good things that are done by others. So if you see some positive qualities about other, then we should not be unhappy towards the others' qualities and others' well-being. 78 ಮಾಡಿದಲ್ಲ. So continually from 78, I shall suffer no losses in this life, and in future lives shall find great happiness. 79. When talking, I should speak from my heart and what is relevant, making the meaning clear and the speech pleasing. I should not speak out of desire or hatred, but in gentle tones and in moderation. Verse number 83. The perfections such as generosity are progressively more exalted. So the first perfection, which is the perfection of generosity, so at the time of that we have to think about how we can progress further, and the ultimate is the perfection of the wisdom. So these are the teachings really of whatever the actual reality. So 84, when this is well understood, I should always strive for the welfare of others. The far-seeing, merciful ones have allowed to do some actions that were forbidden. I should divide my food amongst those who have fallen to lower realms, those without protection and practitioners, and eat merely what is sufficient for myself. Except for 3 robes, I may give away all. So verse number 88, it speaks about how to listen to the Dharma as is present from Vinaya. The Dharma should not be explained to those who lack respect, to those who, like sick men, wear cloth around their heads, to those holding umbrellas, sticks or weapons, to those with covered heads. Not to a woman unaccompanied by a man, the vast and profound should not be taught to lesser beings, should always be equal respect to the dharmas of lesser and higher beings. I should not communicate the dharma of a lesser being to one who is a vessel for the vast dharma. I must not forsake the way of life, nor mislead others by means of sutra or mantras. Verse number 95. Nor should I vividly wave my arms about, but should make my point with slight gestures and a snap of fingers, otherwise I should lose control. When we, since we're a child, when we study the science and the reasonings, and we study about the 4 changeable minds, that the slave, the remorse, and the investigative, and so on. So if at that time we study that if you have generated a positive mind before sleeping, then your whole sleep will be a positive. So if you feel remorse to a positive action, then it will be that remorse will be a negative, but the remorse for a negative actions is a positive. So at the time of even studying the elementary level of the consciousness and the mind and the mental factors at the elementary level, if the teacher could explain at that time, it will be beneficial. So at the time of sleeping also, if one can generate a positive mind before one goes to sleep, the whole sleep could be a very positive. Verse number 98, 3 times by day and 3 times by night, I should recite the Sutra of the 3 Heaps, for by relying upon the Buddhas and the awakening mind, my remaining downfalls will be purified. Whatever I am doing in any situation, whether for myself or for the benefit of others, I should strive to put into practice whatever has been taught for that situation. There is no such thing as something that is not learned by a comparison. Is all in his comments. So the teacher should be someone who is fluent in this verse number 102, that who is voicing the meaning of great virtue. It should be a great bodhisattva practitioner, someone who possesses the two qualities. So that master who is the two who possess the two qualities should not be forsaken even at the cost of one's life. Verse number 103, I should practice entrusting myself to my spiritual master in the manner taught in the biography of Sri Sambhava. This and other advice spoken by the Buddha I can understand through reading the sutras. Verse number 105, where there is a reference to the commentum of the training. So this is the same text written by Shantideva himself. And there is one way of saying that Nagarjuna has composed the commentum of sutra, but not the commentum of training. And Kundalini Lama Rinpoche says that. So Nagarjuna has also composed the commentum of training, and it has not been translated into Tibetan. So whatever the case may be. So the common cause of the vigilance is the conscientiousness and being mindfulness, and the unique cause is as it is stated in the verse number 108. The defining characteristics of guiding alertness in brief is only this: to examine again and again the condition of my body and mind. Therefore, I should put this way of life into actual practice, for what can be achieved by merely talking about it? Will a sick man be benefited merely by reading the medical texts? So the next is the 6th chapter, the chapter on patience. Whatever wholesome deeds, such as venerating the Buddhas and generosity, His Holiness comments that in order to have a good practice of the patience, first we have to know the benefits of the patience. And since the main antidote is the anger, we have to think about the negativities of anger. Verse number 3, my mind will not experience peace if it fosters painful thoughts of hatred. And as we said, the one who is constantly in anger will not have peace for himself, and he won't have any taste for his meals, and also he won't experience a good sleep. Even for us, if we are constantly under anger, then we won't be in peace, even will not have a good sleep. I shall find no joy or happiness. Unable to sleep, I shall feel unsettled. Verse number 4, a master who has hatred is in danger of being killed, even by those who for their wealth and happiness depend upon his kindness. So therefore, so we have to see the negativities of the afflictions pertaining to, especially to anger, and we should not take. We should not always voluntarily accept the anger which is within us. Of course, the afflicted emotions will arise within us, but at that time we have to try as much as possible to distance ourselves from them. So if we do not see the negativities of these afflicted emotions and consider the negative emotions as a nature phenomena that occurs within us, then this leads to all the problems in this world that we witness in this world. Verse number 6. So verse number 6 speaks about how to generate patience. Hence the enemy anger creates suffering such as this, but whoever overcomes it finds happiness now and hereafter. Verse number 7. Having found its fuel of mental unhappiness in the prevention of what I wish for and in doing for what I do not want, hatred increases and then destroys me. So this expression from the verse number 7 is very wonderful. Of course, when someone is under strong influence of anger, at that time, at that very moment, it is difficult to take the countermeasure. So the moment of taking the countermeasure is usually at the time of the causes of the arising of the anger. So when the anger has already overpowered the person, so it is very difficult to calm down it. So this verse number 7 expression is very wonderful. And continue to verse number 8. Therefore I shall totally eradicate the fuel of this enemy. And as we discussed yesterday, we have to work hard to stop the arising of the distorted meditations that actually give rise to the anger and the attachments. Generally, when we speak about the antidotes, we have those antidotes which actually eliminates the emotions, and usually the antidote that eliminates the afflicted emotions, for example, practicing compassion for anger and so on. So for temporary basis, in order to calm down the intensity of the anger and hatred. So this kind of the practicing of compassion will help to decrease the intensity of the negative emotions at that time. So these antidotes are actually not the one which eliminates from the root of those afflicted emotions. So the main antidote that eliminates the root of the anger is actually the understanding of emptiness. And as Nagarjuna says, in the one of the verse of the middle fundamental wisdom, that by the karma and the afflicted emotions, the negative emotions arise, and all phenomena dissolve into the emptiness. So in Tibetan interpretation, there is usually the two ways of interpretations, where one translation uses the agent verb, which emptiness acts as an agent to dissolve every phenomena within it. So having meditated upon the emptiness, so when it comes through the tantric teachings, so you can meditate on the emptiness of the vase or any other objects, but the main important is meditating on the emptiness of your mind. So this becomes very relevant here. Even when you recite Om Subhava Shuddha Savadharma, Subhava Shuddhahang, so the meditation on this no self is usually the basis of that emptiness has to be the self, the very self, which belongs to you. And those aggregates, which are again the absence of the intrinsic reality, which is again explained as the no-self of phenomena. So this understanding and the wisdom and the practices usually has to be taken into the reference of your own. So these are called the antidotes which actually eliminate the afflicted emotions. Verse number 10, why be unhappy about something if it cannot be remedied? And what is the use of being unhappy about something if it cannot be remedied? And this is something very practical. If it unhappiness or a suffering, if there is something that can be remedied, then we have to find the cause and the solution to it. But if there is not a solution for that problem, then we have to leave it at that place. There is nothing we can do more about it. So why be unhappy about something? So this verse Lingro Rinpoche used to recite and say. So when someone seeks advice about some pain or suffering to Lingro Rinpoche, and Lingro Rinpoche used to give the explanation based on this verse. And verse number 11 tells us about the causes, how the anger arises within us. And usually, if you find the belongings, if something harms comes to your friends and for yourself, then you'd feel you'd feel suffer, and if the same thing happens to your enemies, then you feel pleased. But then sometimes if you feel suffer, it is one good way positive is to see the suffering. And for example, the animals cannot see the dangers coming. Only if it occurs at that very moment, they will not be able to avoid it. So therefore, they continues to face a lot of difficulties. So therefore, there is a positive side, a benefit side of the sufferings. Verse number 13, if some ascetics and the people of Karnapa endure the pain of cuts and burns for no reason, then for the sake of liberation, why have I no courage? There is nothing whatsoever that is not made easier through acquaintance. So through becoming acquainted with the small harms, I should learn to patiently accept greater harms. Verse number 17, some when they see their own blood become especially brave and steady. Some when they see the blood of others faint and fall unconscious. These come from the mind, being either steady or timid. Therefore I should disregard harms caused to me and not be affected by suffering. And Lord Buddha first speak in the Four Noble Truth teaching that you have to know the suffering. So he didn't mean that you have to just know the suffering for without any reason. Since we have the capacity and potential to free ourselves from the suffering, and due to, as it is stated in the Uttara Tantra text, that we have the Buddha nature. So with this potential make us possible to free ourselves from suffering. So therefore Lord Buddha first taught that you have to know the suffering. Verse number 23, although they are not wished for, these sicknesses arise, and likewise, although they are not wished for, these disturbing conceptions forcibly arise. And from the verse number 27, this speaks about the Samkhya school, which accepts the 25 knowledges and how it is refuted here. That which is asserted as primary substance and that which is imputed as a self. So the primary substance is the creator, according to the Samkhya schools, and Samkhya schools explains that when the beings do not understand that whatever that they experience and they see is not a manifestations or created by the primary substance, which is similar to a creator. And when the beings learned later that all these things are actually created by the primary substance, then they are regarded as seeing the liberation. And the primary substance run away, feeling ashamed. Verse number 28, if they are unproduced and non-existent, then whatever wish they have to produce. Since would permanently apprehend its objects, it follows that it would never cease to do so. Verse number 31, hence everything is governed by other factors, are governed by others, and in this way nothing governs itself. Having understood this, I should not become angry with phenomena that are like apparitions. So all the happiness and the sufferings actually arise by cause and conditions. So today, a kind of unpleasant feeling or that arise. So you have to think that it comes by inconstant conditions. So you should not be angry merely towards that suffering, but also contemplate or think about those conditions and the causes. So your anger will calm down. At the time of the great anger, as we discussed yesterday, that the distorted meditations actually give rise to these afflicted emotions. So, for example, for someone to become very angry, you need to have a goal. You need to have an object to which you feel anger. So that particular you need to have a target to which you feel anger. So and that target has to appear very harmful or very forceful, very absolute. And you have to also know that the so-called enemy is also within the influence of his own afflicted emotions, and so there is nothing he can also do. So if you really want to get angry, so your anger should be towards that person, towards the distorted meditations and the anger which is present in so-called your enemy. Verse number 35, through not being careful, people even harm themselves with thorns and other things, and for the sake of obtaining women and the like, they become obsessed and deprive themselves of food. Verse number 38, even if I cannot develop compassion for all such people, who through the arisal of disturbing conceptions set out to try and kill me and so forth, the last thing I should do is to become angry with them. And this is a very good reasoning that is presented here. Verse number 40, and even if the faults were temporary, if they who are by nature reliable, it would still be incorrect to be angry, for this will be like begrudging space for allowing smoke to arise in it. Verse number 43, both the weapon and my body are the causes of my suffering. So he gave rise to the weapon and I to the body. With whom should I be angry? Verse number 47, having been instigated by my own actions, those who cause me harm come into being, and if by this they should fall into hell, surely isn't it who am I destroying them? In dependence upon them, I purify many evils by patiently accepting the harms that they cause. So when you encounter your so-called enemies, so it is the so-called your enemy that actually becomes condition for and the causes for you to practice compassion. So the direct antidote of the anger, which is the patience, is only possible through your enemy. So the opportunity for you to sorry.
So you cannot practice patience in relation to the Buddha, nor the Nagarjuna, Master Nagarjuna, nor those who help you and benefit you, but someone or people who are actually harming you, and in relation to them, then you could actually practice patience. And I would like to tell a story here. One person was going on a round in Lhasa, and then there was a person who was sitting on the side of the path, And the first person asked what he was doing, and the second person said that he was meditating on patience, cultivating patience. And then the first person said, in that case, eat shit. And immediately the second person, who was supposed to be meditating on patience, said, you eat shit. He retorted back. And so when we also are provoked when we are provoked, then we also become impatient. And so, therefore, in the practice of patience, those who are supposed to be provoking anger in you should be looked upon as your teacher of patience. And so you would actually be able to see that the person whom you are getting angry at does not actually have any independent existence. And so when you understand that, the anger will not just subside. So when someone actually uses bad language towards you, there's no reason why you should be angry, because it says in the text that the mind is non-physical and so forth. So if your body is not harmed by that, and why the mind would become angry at the person? Verse number 55. Because it will hinder my worldly gain. Even if I do not want it, I shall have to leave my worldly gains behind, and my evil alone will remain unmoved. Thus it is better that I die today than live a long but wicked life. But even if people like me should live a long life, there will always be suffering of death. Suppose someone should awaken from a dream in which he experienced 100 years of happiness, and suppose another should awaken from a dream in which he experiences just one moment of happiness. For both of these people who have awoken, that happiness will never return. Similarly, whether my life has been long or short, at the time of death it will be finished like this. Although I may live happily for a long time through obtaining a great deal of material wealth, I shall go forth empty-handed and destitute, just like having been robbed by a thief. Surely wealth will enable me to live, and then shall be able to consume evil and do good, and so forth. Verse number 63 done. 64 says, should others talk badly of or even destroy holy images, liquors and sacred dharma, it is improper for me to resent it, for the Buddhas can never be injured. I should prevent anger arising towards those who endure my spiritual masters, relatives and friends. Instead, I should see, as in the manner shown before, that such things arise from conditions. Since embodied creatures are endured by both animate beings and inanimate objects, why only here bear malice to the animate? It follows that I should patiently accept all harm. Should one person ignorantly do wrong and another become angry with him, who would be at fault and who would be without fault? Why did I previously commit those actions because of which others now cause me harm? Since everything is related to my action, why should I bear malice towards these enemies? So it seems that when attachment and anger are related, The more you're attached towards oneself and others, a slight provocation could give rise to anger towards that person or thing. So, for example, if a couple were really strongly attached to one another, then because of that attachment, a slight provocation could give them rise to intense anger within them. So that was comment on verse number 71, for fear of my merit being burned, and so forth. And verse number 72, why is man condemned for death not fortunate, to death not fortunate, if he is released after having his hand cut off? Why am I who am experiencing human misery not fortunate, if by that I'm spared from the agonies of hell, and so forth. Verse number 73 done, 74 done. So 79 done. 80. Having generated the awakening mind through wishing all beings to be happy, why should I become angry if they find some happiness in themselves? Next verse says, if I wish for all sentient beings to become Buddhas worshipped throughout the three realms, then why am I tormented when I see them receiving mere mundane respect? If a relative for whom I am caring to whom I must give many things should be able to find his own livelihood, wouldn't I be happy rather than angry? If I do not wish for beings to have even this, how can I wish for them to awaken? And where is there an awakening mind? In him who becomes angry when others receive things. What does it matter if my enemies, and so forth. Verse number 87. From there starts what is known in Tibetan as Bambo Nipa, second section or something like that, segment within the text. So when others praise you or do something good, it doesn't help you in the increase of your own merit and long life, longevity. So that was a comment on the verse number 90, where it says, this honor of praise and fame will not turn into my merit nor life. It will give me neither strength nor freedom from sickness, and will not provide any physical happiness. If I were aware of what held meaning for me, what value would I find in these things? If all I want is a little mental happiness, I should devote myself to gambling, drinking, and so forth. If, for the sake of fame, I give away my wealth or get myself killed, what can the mere word of fame do then? Once I have died, to whom will they give pleasure? So verse number 98. Praise and so forth distract me, because when you get praise from others, it would actually distract your mind from your own goal, achieving or working towards your goal, and also undermine my disillusion with cycling existence. I start to envy those who have good qualities, and all the very best is destroyed. So when people are less wealthy, and the poorer people are more have greater happiness. So when I was in Patna just recently, I told the chief minister of this state of Bihar that he should work towards the development of the rural areas with building schools and the basic infrastructures as well as the different facilities. If he could actually, the villages or the rural areas could have them, then there would be less pollution and the bad things that are happening in the big cities. For example, Bangalore used to be quite clean in the past, and then there's less suicide, because in the cities, the big cities, there's more number of people committing suicide. Why is that so? Although the people in the cities have all the good facilities, but because there's this lack of human touch amongst the people, or whereas in the rural areas, people live together in a community and there's more sense of human feeling to one another, and therefore there's less suicide in the villages, and they are more relaxed, unlike those in the cities who are stressed out more. And so in verse number 98, and I started and so forth. Therefore are not those who are closely involved in destroying my praise and the like. And so when people have more wealth and riches, then there is more jealousy and a sense of competition, and that in turn gives rise to more problems for them. Therefore, and also involved in protecting me from falling into the unfortunate realms, I, who am striving for freedom, do not need to be bound by material gain and honor. So why should I be angry with those who free me from this bondage? Those who wish to cause me suffering are like Buddhas bestowing waves of blessing, as they've opened the door for my not going to an unfortunate realm. Why should I be angry with them? But what if someone should obstruct my gaining merit, with him who too it is incorrect to be angry? And so verse number 104 shows the relationship between the cause and effect, that effect cannot arise without cause, and that a cause is indispensable for an effect. If without it something does not occur, and if with it it does come to be, then since the enemy would be the cause of patience, how can I say that he prevents it? A beggar is not an obstacle to generosity. When I'm giving something away, and I cannot say that those who give ordination are an obstacle to become ordained. So verse number 108 says, the very first fruit of my patience, for in this way he is the cause of it. So because the true path and true cessation do help and benefit one in whom sorry, there was a problem in hearing His Holiness. So verse number 110, but surely my enemy is not to be venerated, for he intends to cause. So, of course, with regard to the enemy, the so-called enemy, that person who is someone who harms you, and therefore he or she is the person who gives you the opportunity to practice patience, and therefore you should feel happy to have that opportunity to practice patience. So therefore it says, but surely my enemy is not venerated, for then he intends to cause me harm. 거길래.
Some technical problem.
So the Buddha shows us the path to attain omniscience state. And another course for Buddhahood is the main course is the cultivation of bodhicitta, of equalizing through equalizing and exchanging self and others. So we cannot practice cherishing others in relation to the Buddhas, but we can practice patience and in relation to sentient beings, and also in relation with regard to the wisdom of emptiness. We can practice them in relation to sentient beings, the poor sentient beings who have suffering, and therefore the sentient beings become precious for us. And so to reach Buddhahood, we have the sentient beings. Therefore, the text says, why do I respect the Buddhas and not the sentient beings? Because the 113 Buddha's qualities are gained from the sentient beings and the conquerors alike. So why do I not respect them in the same way as I respect the conquerors? I lost the transmission. Sorry. So His Holiness is reading through the text again. 114. So if you actually have faith in the Buddhas and the Mahayana Sangha, right from the beginning of their practicing or cultivating bodhicitta, they have actually engaged in their practices for the benefit of all sentient beings. So while respecting the Buddhas and the Sangha, how can we actually disregard the sentient beings and be indifferent towards them, those sentient beings whom the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas consider very precious? And so we have a notion that the Buddhas are someone who are to be worshipped, and the sentient beings are as if some kind of a object for our use. I mean, that's totally wrong. So verse number 122 says, because of their happiness the conquerors are delighted, but if they are harmed, they are displeased. Hence, by pleasing them I shall delight the conquerors, and by harming them I shall hurt the conquerors. Just as desirable sense objects would give my mind no pleasure if my body was ablaze with fire, likewise, when living creatures are in pain, there is no way for the compassionate ones to be pleased. Therefore, as I have caused them to as I've caused harm to living beings, today I openly declare all my unwholesome actions that have brought displeasure to the compassionate ones. Please bear with me, O Lord, for this displeasure I have caused you. So with regard to the patience, the practice of patience here, and helping others and serving others. So it says 125, from now on, in order to delight the Tathagatas, the 127, sorry, pleasing living beings delights the Tathagatas, and perfectly accomplishes my own purpose as well. And so bodhicitta serves that purpose of oneself and others. And then in this life as well as the next lives, whether for yourself or your company, your partners and so forth. If we could create a world filled with love, a compassionate world, then we could actually work against these negative emotions. Otherwise, it's difficult if we indulge only in material gains and material development. Of course, we need material development and progress, because through this material gain and comfort, we have physical comfort. And today, there are lots of poor people, destitute. Very few people are rich and affluent, but most people live in poverty. So that when we look at this situation, it's really sad, isn't it? And if we look in Africa, for example, again. I don't know. Can't hear anything. What's wrong? So Islam is talking about the different religious practitioners, followers of different religions, from making prayers to their own gods. Of course, we create lots of problems. If we have the opportunity to see these gods or Buddha and so forth, and ask them, please bring peace to the world, what would they say? Who actually destroys or disturbs the peace in the world? And Buddha also would say the same thing. Who destroys peace in the world? So of course, it's human beings, us, who are destroying our peace of mind and peace in the world. And therefore, just making prayer to the gods on the part of the Christians and other theistic followers of theistic religions, and for the Buddhists to pray to Buddha and Bodhisattvas for peace in the world is not practical and realistic. So we are on 127. And perfectly accomplished. In addition, it dispels the pain and misery of the universe. Therefore, I should always practice it. For example, should some of the king's men cause harm to verse number 33. So if you are affectionate and kind towards others, human beings as well as other animals, it says, why do I not see that my future attainment of Buddhahood, as well as glory, renown and happiness in this very life, all come from pleasing sentient beings? So if you are kind and affectionate and compassionate towards others, you will be happy in this life. You will have a healthy life. And so it says, leave alone. So leave alone attaining the Buddhahood in the future, which comes from delighting or pleasing sentient beings. Even in this life, you will not have honor, greatness, and a name. So through the practice of patience, while in cyclic existence, patience causes beauty, health, and renown. Because of these, I shall live for a very long time, and with the extensive pleasures of the universal chakra king. This is the 6th chapter on patience. We are now chapter 6, having patience. So with regard to that of patience, there are 3 types of patience. The laziness. Having patience, I should develop enthusiasm for an awakening, for awakening will dwell only in those who exert themselves. Just as there is no movement without wind, so merit does not occur without enthusiasm. What is enthusiasm? It is finding joy in what is wholesome. Its opposing factors are explained as laziness, attraction to what is bad, and despising oneself out of despondency. So these are the 3 types of verse. Laziness mentioned in verse number 2. So we are on verse number 11. If even in this life I shall be crippled with fear, like that of a fish being rolled in hot sand, why even mention the unbearable agonies of hell that will result from my own unwholesome deeds? Verse number 14 says, relying upon the boat, this boat of a human body, free yourself from the great river of pain, as it is hard to find this boat again. This is no time for sleep, you fool. And so, with regard to verse number 16, it says, without indulging despondency, which refers to having the inner self-confidence, I should gather the support for enthusiasm. And so you need to gather all the forces to fight against this, and honestly take control of myself, and then by seeing the equality between self and others, I should practice exchanging self and others. So I should never indulge in despondency by entertaining such thoughts. How shall I ever awaken? How the Tathagatas who speak what is true have uttered this truth, if that they develop the strength of their exertion even those who are flies, mosquitoes, bees, and insects will win the unsurpassable awakening, which is so hard to find. So for us as humans, we have the Buddha nature within ourselves, which is the ultimate potential or the ultimate course within ourselves for attainment of Buddhahood. And so what obstructs us from attaining that goal is that of ignorance and the negative emotions and those of the obscuration to knowledge. But these can be overcome. So it says in verse number 19, so if I do not forsake the Bodhisattvas as way of life, why should so verse number 17. So he's now going over them. Why should someone like myself who has been born in a human race not attain awakenings and so forth? And also, but nevertheless, it frightens me to think that I may have to give away my arms and legs without discrimination between what is heavy and what is light and so forth. And so here, we cannot feel discouraged by saying that the Buddhahood is something difficult to attain. And so, for the sake of infinite sentient beings, to attain this infinite, the state of Buddhahood, by working for an infinite number of, infinitely long duration and so forth. I mean, we need to understand these four immeasurables that are taught in that of the Ratnavali, the precious garland by Nagarjuna. So I'm reduced to fear through confusion. Verse number 21, for over countless myriads of eons I have been cut, stabbed, burned, and flayed alive innumerable times, but I have not awakened. Yet the suffering involved in my awakening will have a limit. It is like the suffering of having an incision made in order to remove and destroy greater pain. Even doctors eliminate illness with unpleasant medical treatment. So in order to overcome manifold sufferings, I should be able to put up with some discomfort. So as it is said in verse number 26, when you reach a certain level of high attainment, it says, at such a time when my mind is developed to the point of regarding my body like food, then what hardship would there be when it came to giving away my flesh, having forsaken all evil, there would be no suffering, and due to wisdom there would no lack of joy. But now my mind is afflicted by mistaken conceptions, and my body is caused harm by unwholesome deeds. And then the next one. And so when verse number 30, when you have developed your bodhicitta to a certain degree of strength, then you could actually say that, so having mounted, so which intelligent person does feel discouraged to ride the bodhicitta of the horse of bodhicitta, which leads one from bliss to bliss without despair, is what one would come to think. So verse number 31, it's the support and so forth. And verse number 32, so these shows what are known as the four forces, which are the force of a force of faith, force of pride, and then joy, and force of relinquishing. Thus, in order to increase my enthusiasm, I should strive to abandon its opposing forces, to amass the support of aspiration, self-confidence, joy, and rest, to practice in earnest, and to become strong in self-control. I shall have to overcome the boundless faults of myself and others. In order to destroy each of these faults alone, I may have to strive until an ocean of aeon is exhausted. But I've never developed an acquaintance with even a fraction of these excellences. How strange it is to squander this birth that I have found by some coincidence. I have not made offering to the Lord, but thus I have not given pleasure to the great festivals, and I have not performed actions for the teaching, I have not fulfilled the wishes of the poor, I have not granted fearless to the frightened, and I have not given happiness to the weak. All I have given rise to is to the agonies in the mother's womb and to suffering, and so forth. So here, when it comes to when it talks about this pride, it's not that kind of the pride as in negative emotions, but having self-confidence. So before taking any pride and self-confidence, you should actually check whether you can actually do something or not, as verse number 47 says. First of all, I should examine well what is to be done, to see, because if the thing is something that you cannot accomplish, then there's no way you can actually promise or take pride in. If you can, then you need to put effort, because if it's something that you can actually achieve or push through to achieve your goal, then you should put effort. And once you put effort, you should never back off from that. So to see what I can pursue it or cannot undertake it. If I may, unable to, it's best to leave it. But once I have started, I must not withdraw. So if the thing is something that you can do and you feel that confident that you can actually achieve the goal, then you should carry on with it. So in order to see the reality of what you are thinking or to do, you need to look at the situation from many different dimensions. From like four or six dimensions, from the right, left, and front, the back, and above and below. And then if you really see that you can do it, and how you go about with that, achieving it, if you can plan systematically to achieve that, then if you feel that you can do that, then you should start the work. So having checked, and if you feel that you can do the thing, then you should have that pride of work, the activity or the work, and the pride of being able to do it. And so there is the pride of afflictions and so forth. So here the text says, thinking I alone shall do it is the self-confidence of action. So it's very important always to check whether you can do the thing, the thing or not before making any promise. You should not be like dogs barking when some other dog starts barking or howling, and then the others also start howling or barking at others. You should not be like that, but have the self-confidence that you can do it by yourself alone. So powerless, their minds disturbed. People in this world are unable to benefit themselves. Therefore, I shall do it for them. Since, unlike me, these beings are incapable. Verse number 53. Verse number 54. And next is again the confidence or the pride of the afflictions shown by verse number 56 down. Verse number 57 down. Inflated by the disturbing conceptions of my self-importance, I shall be led by it to lower realms. It destroys the joyous festival of being human. I shall become a slave, eating the food of others, and so forth. So verse number 59, whoever seizes the self-confidence in order to conquer the enemy of self-importance. So you are able to see the shortcomings of the negative emotions, and you are actually able to point them out. And you are not afraid of the negative emotions, but you actually have this confidence that you can overcome them. So you are not overpowered by them. You are not under the sway of these negative emotions. He is the self-confident one, the victorious hero. And in addition, whoever definitely conquers the spread of this enemy of self-importance completely wins the fruit of a conqueror, fulfilling the wishes of the world. Then, verse number 60. I find myself amidst a crowd with disturbing conceptions. I shall endure them in 1,000 ways. Like a lion among foxes, I will not be affected by this disturbing host. Just as men will guard their eyes when great danger and turmoil occur, likewise I shall never be swayed by the disturbances within my mind, even at times of great strife. It would be better for me to be burned, to have my head cut off and to be killed, rather than ever bowing down to those ever-present disturbing conceptions. So likewise, in all situations I should do nothing other than what is fit. Verse number 66 finished. So you should have the inner strength and determination with self-confidence and courage that you would carry on with the work that you have pledged to do. And then the next verse relates to the power of abandoning, which means when you are too tired and weak to carry on, it's not going to be so good to carry on with the work until you have gained mastery and full control over your inner energy. And you should not force yourself. Push yourself to do, even when you are weak and tired. So that's so when my strength declines, I should leave whatever I'm doing in order to be able to continue with it later. Having done something well, I should put it aside with the wish to accomplish what will follow. So just an old warrior approaches the swords of an enemy upon the battlefront, so shall I avoid the weapons of disturbing emotions and skillfully bind this enemy. If someone dropped his sword during a battle, he would immediately pick it up out of fear. Likewise, if I lose the weapon of mindfulness, I should quickly retrieve it, being afraid of hell. Just as poison spreads throughout the body and depends upon the circulation of blood, likewise, if disturbing conceptions finds an opportunity, unwholesomeness will permeate my mind. Those who practice should be as attentive as a frightened man carrying a jar full of mustard oil who is being threatened by someone with a sword that he will be killed if he spills just one drop. Just as I would be swiftly stand up if a snake came into my life. Likewise, if any sleep or laziness occur, I shall quickly turn them back. So we are finished with chapter 6. Chapter 6 or 7, which is the chapter on enthusiasm or joyous effort. Which chapter 8, having developed enthusiasm in this way, I should place my mind in concentration, for the man whose mind is distracted dwells between the fangs of disturbing conceptions. So we'll switch to the Bhavanakrama, the other text. We are on page, what's in the cover list? So with regard to the concentration, so our mind usually is distracted everywhere. And in the world today, when people think about happiness, I mean, they usually think about sensorial pleasure, and sensorial pleasures are actually distractions. True peace of mind must come through mind on the basis of the mental consciousness. And so you need to avert or overcome that of the anger and so forth on the basis of the mind, not letting yourself be distracted by the sensorial experiences alone, but maintaining your focus, remaining focused in the mind itself. So, for example, in the morning, as soon as you awake and wake up from your sleep, your mind is not so clear, but you could just wash your face and freshen up yourself, and then sit down and do some meditation. Your mind will be fresh. In the afternoons and evening, the mind is not so clear like that in the morning. And so it's important to do meditation in the morning. When, of course, usually we are distracted by the negative, sensorial experiences. So what we need to try to do is not let ourselves be distracted by sound, signs, sight, and also different thoughts. So Let your mind not follow after what is the past memories. So whatever thoughts and experiences you had in the past, you don't follow them, and then you are not also anticipating what's going to come in the future, but place your mind on the moment, in the moment itself of the natural state of the mind itself. So when you try to do that, what you'll see is that usually our mind is the sixth mind, the mental consciousness is almost like covered by the sensorial experiences. But when you stop them, just focus on the mind itself, the present moment itself, then you will, at some point, you'll feel some kind of a vacuity. And so at that point, I mean, your mind, your sensorial perceptions are not distracted anywhere, and you are not aware of what's going on in the sensorial experience. But after that vacuity, then you will see that mere awareness and the luminous nature of the mind. And if you are able to actually focus on that nature of the mind, you will see it clearly. So that clear, the clarity or luminosity and the awareness nature should be clear. I mean, you should have a clear idea of it and experience of it. And so in the introduction to the mind, you should be introduced to that. And for the concentration of, to develop concentration based on the mind, that's how you should go about with the practice. In order to be able to focus your mind single-pointedly, I mean, you could sometimes use the in and out breath, which is slightly subtler focus than the coarser focus than the mind itself, but slightly subtler focus or object than the external objects. And so you could just focus your mind on the breath, in and out breath itself, so that gradually it helps. It becomes a means to focus your mind single-pointedly on the object. So please look at the bhavana karama, the stages of meditation. We'll continue from where we left. So it's on page number 216 in the book. So after conventional awakening mind, after generating conventional awakening mind of bodhicitta, endeavor to cultivate the ultimate awakening mind of bodhicitta. The ultimate bodhicitta is transcendental and free from all elaborations. It is extremely clear, the object of ultimate stainless, unwavering like a butter lamp undisturbed by the mind. This is achieved through constant and respectful familiarity with the yoga of calm abiding and meditation and special insight over a long period of time. So with regard to this calm abiding and the special insight, it mentions in the sutra that all the goodness or the good qualities developed within samsara and the transcendental qualities beyond samsara are the results of these two, calm abiding and special insight. So the unraveling of the thought sutra says, so with calm abiding mind, your mind is single-pointedly focused, and especially when you have the experience of physical and mental pliancy, the negative emotions are less in you. It's like they have kind of subsided. So without the light of wisdom, the latent potential of the disturbing emotions cannot be thoroughly destroyed, and therefore their complete destruction will not be possible. For this reason, the unraveling of the thought of sutras is concentration can suppress the disturbing emotions properly, and the wisdom can thoroughly destroy their latent potential. The unraveling of the thought sutra also says, even if you meditate with single-pointed concentration, you will not destroy the misconception of self, and your disturbing emotions will disturb you again. This is the Udraka's single-pointed meditation. When the selflessness of phenomenon is examined specifically and meditations are performed on the basis of that analysis, that is the cause of the resultant liberation. No other cause can bring peace. Also, the Bodhisattva section says, those who haven't heard these various teachings of the Bodhisattva collection and have also not heard the implemented teaching of monastic discipline, who think that single-pointed concentration alone is enough, will fall into the pit of arrogance due to pride. As such, they cannot gain complete release from rebirth, old age, sickness, death, misery, lamentation, suffering, mental unhappiness, and disturbances. And neither do they gain complete liberation from the cycle of 6 states of existence, nor from the heaps of suffering, mental and physical aggregates. Keeping this in mind, the Tathagata has said the hearing of teaching will help you to gain liberation from old age and death. For these reasons, those who wish to attain thoroughly purified transcendental wisdom by eliminating all obscurations should meditate on wisdom while remaining in calm abiding meditation, and so forth. And then the wisdom section, the heap of jewels sutra says, single-pointed concentration is achieved by adhering to moral ethics. So mere single-pointed concentration, calm abiding, can overcome the negative emotions completely. The elimination of these negative emotions can be overcome by the wisdom, this special insight, or this penetrative insight. Yet, without the single-pointed concentration, this wisdom will not be able to, will not have the full strength to overcome the negative emotions. So a yogi's mind will be distracted to various objects if he cultivates only special insight without developing calmly abiding mind. It will be unstable like a butter lamp in wind, since clarity of pristine awareness will be absent. These two should be cultivated equally. Therefore, the Sutra of the Great Completeness, Transcendence of Suffering says, hearers cannot see Buddha nature because their single-pointed absorption is stronger and wisdom is weaker. So Bodhisattvas can see it. Mainly, it's referring to the selflessness of phenomena. So what this the author is saying is that in order to overcome the obscuration to knowledge, you must realize emptiness or selflessness of phenomena, not only satisfying with the selflessness of persons. In order to overcome the negative emotions alone, you don't need to, he's saying that you don't need to realize selflessness of phenomena, but the selflessness of wisdom of selflessness of persons alone can do that. So common prerequisites for meditating on calm abiding and special insight. Initially, the yogi who should seek the prerequisites that can assist him assist him in actualizing calm abiding meditation, special insights quickly and easily. So, of course, calm abiding meditation and vipassana are shared with non-Buddhist tradition as well. Single-pointed concentration, which is very important, which causes your mind not to get distracted, but stay focused single-pointedly. And therefore, although it is a shared quality, without this calm abiding meditation, the single-pointed concentration, you will not be able to progress along the path. As I said earlier, even if you may have generated bodhicitta, but without the single-pointed concentration, even if you may have some understanding of emptiness, but if you cannot achieve that, the experience, the meditative experience of emptiness, focused on emptiness, single-pointedly, you need to have single-pointed concentration. The prerequisites necessary for the development of calm abiding meditation are: so you should have a place which is live in a conducive environment where there's no, it's an isolated place and there is no disturbance with sounds and noise around you, because that sounds and noises, if there are too much noise, then that actually is a distraction to your concentration practice. So the place should be something which is a favorable place to live in, a conducive place, environment, to limit your desires and practice contentment, not being involved in too many activities, maintaining pure moral ethics, and fully eliminating attachment and all other kinds of conceptual thoughts. A conducive environment should be known by these 5 characteristics: providing easy access to food and clothes, being free of evil beings and enemies, being free from diseases, being containing good friends who maintain moral ethics and who share similar views, and being visited by few people in the daytime and with little noise at night. So limiting your desire refers not to being excessively attached to many or good clothes, such as religious robes and so forth. The practice of contentment means always being satisfied with little thing like inferior religious robes and so forth. Not being involved in many activities refers to giving up ordinary activities like business, avoiding too close association with householders and monks, and totally abandoning the practice of medicine and astrology. Even in the case of statement that is a transgression of the hearer's vows cannot be destroyed, if there is a regret and an awareness of the intention not to repeat it, and an awareness of the lack of a true identity of the mind that performed the action, or familiarity with the lack of true identity of all phenomena, that person's morality can be said to be pure. This should be understood from the Sutra of the elimination of Ajatashatru's regret. You should overcome your regret with special effort in meditation, being mindful of the various defects of attachment in this life and future lives. Help eliminate misconceptions in this regard. Some common features of both beautiful and ugly things in the cycle of existence are that they are all unstable and subject to disintegration. It is beyond doubt that you will be separated from all of these things without delay. So meditate on why you should be excessively attached to these things, and they then discard all misconceptions. So that's the end of the instructions for the prerequisite for single-pointed concentration, calm abiding. And then the next is prerequisites for special insight. And here, of the two types of the special insight, one mundane and the other supramundane, this refers to the supramundane.